For 30 years, it did not exist. No map showed it. No satellite marked it. No public record named it. And yet, in the freezing northern sea, far below the last light of the sun, sonar operators began detecting something impossible. Not a shipwreck, not a rock formation. Not a natural trench. It was a structure, long, angular, buried in the seabed. And beside it, deep under layers of silt and black water, a sealed entrance was still opening and closing, as if something below was still alive. The Soviet Union had collapsed decades earlier, so the question was simple: who, or what, was still operating a hidden Soviet base at the bottom of the ocean? The deep ocean is the most silent place on Earth. It is also one of the most violent. Below a few hundred meters, sunlight disappears. Color dies. Distance loses meaning. The water becomes a cold, crushing weight that presses in from every direction at once. At a depth of 1,000 meters, the pressure is already enough to destroy an ordinary submarine. At 3,000, metal bends, seals fail, and even small mistakes become fatal. At 6,000 meters, human beings enter a world that was never meant for them, and still we know almost nothing about it. People often say we know more about the surface of the moon than the floor of our own oceans. That idea is repeated so often because it feels true. The deep sea remains Earth's last great unknown, a place of darkness without horizon, a place where sound travels farther than light, a place where strange life survives in total isolation, feeding on chemicals that rise from the planet's interior, a place where mountains, trenches, vents, and canyons remain hidden beneath miles of black water. It is easy to think of the ocean as empty. It is not empty. It is simply beyond our sight. And sometimes, when science lowers its instruments into that darkness, the ocean sends something back, a sound, a signal, a shape on sonar, something that should not be there. Exploring the deep sea is not like exploring land. On land, machines fail and people can still breathe. In deep water, failure is immediate. Pressure is the first enemy. Every 10 meters of depth adds more force. At abyssal depths, that force becomes overwhelming. Acrylic cracks, steel distorts, electronics flood. Cables twist under tension. Lights vanish into black water after only a short distance. The cold is another problem. Near the seafloor in polar regions, the temperature can remain just above freezing. Lubricants thicken. Batteries weaken. Moving parts become unreliable. Then there is communication. Radio signals do not travel well through seawater. Deep-sea teams depend on acoustic systems, fiber optic tethers, and delayed telemetry. A submersible can descend for hours and still feel cut off from the world above. Even when data returns, it is often incomplete. Static interrupts. Sonar reflections distort. Video feeds break into noise. And the seabed itself is not stable. Sediment shifts slowly over time. Methane pockets can distort readings. Cold seeps release gas. Hydrothermal systems alter chemistry. Magnetic anomalies interfere with instruments. Entire sections of the seafloor can appear flat one year and different the next. This is why the deep sea creates mystery so easily. Not because scientists are careless, but because the environment is extreme enough to hide its own truths. And in the late 1990s, in a remote section of the Arctic Ocean, that darkness seemed to reveal a secret that should have died with the Soviet state. It began with a survey vessel and a sonar map. The research ship Aurelia was not looking for a military site. Its mission was geological. In September of 1998, an international team was charting a deep basin north of the Barents Shelf. The goal was simple: map sediment layers, track tectonic faulting. Study methane hydrate deposits in a region where the seabed had been poorly documented. The work was slow. Multi-beam sonar swept the seafloor in broad arcs. Sub-bottom profilers sent acoustic pulses through layers of mud and sediment. Computers translated echoes into rough digital terrain. At first, the anomaly looked like bad data. One technician saw a straight line where no straight line should exist. Then another line appeared beside it. Then angles, clean angles. Natural formations can create strange shadows. That happens often. But these returns were to organized. The shape was long, partially buried, and aligned along a shallow ridge on the basin floor. Its outline measured nearly 400 meters end to end. Near the central section, something even stranger appeared beneath the sediment, a void. Not an empty cave formed by geology. A hollow space with repeated internal intervals, like chambers. The crew rescanned the site, then scanned it again from another angle. The image remained. A senior geophysicist suggested an old industrial structure. A pipeline station, perhaps, but the depth made that unlikely. The site lay far beyond the range of normal undersea construction of that period. There were no records of any civilian project there. No drilling platforms. No cable hubs. No abandoned mining systems. Then, just after midnight, while the ship held position above the anomaly, the acoustic operator heard a pulse on the underwater channel. It was brief. Low frequency. 3 bursts, pause. 3 bursts again. It repeated every 4 to 7 seconds. The team first assumed it came from their own equipment, interference, mechanical cycling, a faulty transducer. They shut systems down one by one. The pulse continued. It was coming from below them, from the structure. The captain ordered a drop camera into the water before dawn. The camera descended through layers of cold black sea. At first there was nothing to see, only drifting particles, lit white against darkness. Then the seabed emerged. Flat sediment, scars in the mud. Fragments of twisted metal. And then, on the edge of the floodlights, a wall, not stone. Metal, dark, corroded, and buried, but unmistakably artificial. The feed shook as the cable swayed. For less than 4 seconds, the camera captured a circular opening set into the structure's side. A hatch. It was half open. Then the image went dead. The first response was caution. The Aurelia crew archived the data and returned to port with more questions than answers. The footage was reviewed by multiple agencies and independent specialists. Most believed the structure was real. No one agreed on what it was. The location drew quiet attention. Within months, a second expedition was organized under a different purpose. Officially, it was another geological survey. Unofficially, the mission focused on the anomaly. This time the team brought more equipment. A work-class remotely operated vehicle, a magnetometer array, high-frequency imaging sonar, sediment samplers. Water chemistry instruments, and a pressure-resistant acoustic recorder designed to remain on the seafloor for weeks. The descent was conducted in calm conditions. The ROV dropped slowly through darkness with 2 pilot operators guiding its movement from a control room lined with monitors. As it neared the seafloor, suspended material thickened. Visibility dropped. The water carried fine particles like smoke underwater. The base appeared in stages, first the outer surface, then rows of vent-like recesses, then reinforced seams under heavy corrosion. The structure was not elegant. It was industrial, massive. Built for endurance. Soviet markings were discovered only later, and only in fragments. One plate, half buried in calcified buildup, showed faded lettering in Cyrillic. Another surface revealed red paint beneath marine deposits. Inside a broken panel, engineers found cable shielding and alloys consistent with late Cold War military hardware. Still, nothing explained why the site had been placed there. The base extended deeper into the sediment than expected. Sonar suggested most of it was buried. Only the upper sections remained exposed. It was less like a station resting on the seabed and more like a facility built into it. The hatch seen in the original footage was located again. It stood in a shallow depression ringed by debris. The hinges appeared functional. That was the disturbing part. After decades underwater, in cold salt water, under pressure, that mechanism should have been frozen in place. But scrape marks around the frame looked recent. The ROV attempted to enter. At 3 meters from the opening, its lights flickered. Telemetry dropped. The navigation display spun and reset. Then the manipulator arm, without command, jerked sharply to the left and struck the hull. The pilots backed away. Every time the vehicle approached the hatch, the same thing happened. Signal noise increased. Compass readings drifted. Video gained rolling distortions. Internal diagnostics showed brief power irregularities no engineer could explain. A theory emerged. There might be a strong electromagnetic source inside the structure, but that made the mystery worse. There should have been no power source left. No reactor. No active grid. No surviving control system. And yet the instruments behaved as if something was still generating fields below the seafloor. Then the seafloor recorder began returning audio. The same pulse heard years earlier had changed. It was no longer repeating every 4 to 7 seconds. Now it came in irregular intervals, sometimes 5 minutes apart, sometimes 11, sometimes twice in rapid succession. And hidden beneath the pulses was something else, a metallic reverberation, like a distant door closing somewhere deep inside a flooded corridor. As the investigation continued, small details began turning the site from unusual to deeply unsettling. The first clue came from the sediment. Samples collected near the hatch contained traces of synthetic compounds not expected in that environment. Not recent fuel. Not simple industrial contamination. Complex residues associated with insulation materials and hydraulic systems. They were degraded, but measurable. That suggested the site had not merely sunk there. It had operated there. The second clue came from biology. Marine life avoided the opening. This was strange because deep-sea structures usually attract organisms. Bacteria colonize exposed surfaces. Crustaceans gather in crevices. Fish circle artificial cover. Here, the pattern was uneven. The outer hull hosted normal growth, but the hatch depression remained unusually bare. Few organisms settled there. Even scavengers passing through the camera lights changed direction before entering the area. Then came the damaged equipment. During the third dive, the ROV placed a marker beacon 20 meters from the entrance. When the team returned the next day, the beacon was gone, not broken. Gone. The seafloor around the placement site showed a drag line disappearing toward the hatch. A second beacon was deployed with higher anchoring force. Its feed cut out after 6 hours. When recovered by tether sweep, the casing was crushed inward, not exploded outward. Crushed inward. Pressure damage should have affected the entire housing equally. Instead, the deformation was concentrated along one side, as if something had gripped it. The acoustic recordings grew stranger. Software analysis identified rhythmic variations within the pulses. Some intervals were so regular that statisticians flagged them as non-random. Not language. Not a code anyone could decode. But not simple machinery either. then the visual evidence changed. During a low-angle sonar pass along the structure's eastern side, operators noticed tracks in the sediment, long grooves dot parallel, repeated over several meters. They did not match trawl marks or geological sliding. They looked like something heavy had moved across the seabed, then vanished where the ridge dropped into darkness. No footage captured the moving object, but a later video sweep found one more clue. Far from the hatch, on the buried rear section of the base, a maintenance panel hung open. Inside was empty darkness, and on the inside edge of the panel, fresh scrape marks gleamed silver against old corrosion. Something had opened it recently. Until this point, the mystery centered on one impossible question. Why did a forgotten Soviet base appear to show signs of activity? But the next discovery changed the scale of the entire story. A deeper scan was ordered, not around the structure, under it. Using sub-bottom profiling, the survey team sent lower frequency pulses into the sediment below the main installation. The first results seemed confused. Layering, voids, discontinuities. Then a clearer model emerged. The visible structure was only the top of something much larger. Beneath the exposed base, descending into the seabed at an angle, was a vertical shaft or access column. Below that, at greater depth, the scans suggested a second complex larger older irregular in shape. The upper base now looked less like a complete facility and more like an outpost, a cap, a sealed entrance built above something hidden farther below. No one on the ship spoke much after that. The ocean floor around the site was re-examined with side-scan sonar. Additional anomalies appeared in a rough ring around the main structure. Collapsed sections, linear debris fields, possible cable trenches extending outward and then disappearing under sediment. It resembled infrastructure connected to a buried network. A deep-tow camera system was sent to the slope beyond the ridge to search for associated wreckage or construction remains. Instead, it found a second hatch smaller half buried, set into exposed rock 30 meters down the slope, and above it, barely visible in drifting silt, were carved grooves in the rock face, not natural fractures. Not tool marks from ordinary excavation. The grooves formed repeated geometric patterns, rectangles within rectangles precise, worn smooth by time. That was when some researchers stopped using the word base at all, because the Soviet structure no longer seemed like the original mystery. It seemed like something built on top of an older one, something found by Soviet engineers, something sealed, studied, and perhaps never understood. The final dive of the expedition was meant to inspect the lower hatch. The ROV descended along the slope in near-zero visibility. Thrusters stirred clouds of fine sediment. The pilot slowed to avoid collision. At 14 meters from the hatch, the audio channel began to pick up a new sound. A deep tone continuous almost below hearing. The vehicle's altitude sensor fluctuated, though the seabed beneath it was level. Video distortion rolled upward through the screen like heat haze. Then, for 3 seconds, the floodlights illuminated the rock wall in full. The geometric grooves reflected light with a dull metallic sheen. They were not cut into the rock they were embedded in it, as if the stone had formed around an older structure. Before the pilots could respond, the feed froze. When the image returned, the ROV was facing away from the wall. Its internal clock had lost 22 seconds. No command had been recorded for rotation. No impact alarm had triggered. No thruster burst explained the movement. And one of the forward cameras, later recovered, contained a final corrupted frame. It showed a curved surface very close to the lens. Smooth. Dark. Not rock. not metal of any known marine equipment. On that surface were 3 points of pale light, arranged like eyes. No single explanation has ever resolved what was found beneath the Arctic Sea, but 3 theories continue to surface. The first is the military theory. According to this idea, the Soviets built an ultra-deep listening station during the Cold War, a hidden seabed platform designed to monitor submarine traffic, track undersea acoustics, or test advanced power systems far from public observation. The strange pulses may have come from automated equipment cycling long after human control ended. This theory explains the Soviet materials. It explains the industrial construction. It even explains the secrecy. But it does not explain the deeper complex beneath the station. And it does not explain why the lower structures appear older than the base above them. The second is the geological theory. Some researchers argue that extreme mineralization, magnetic deposits, methane seepage, and unusual rock formation created misleading readings. According to this view, the hatch-like openings, geometric patterns, and distorted signals were the result of human pattern recognition under uncertain conditions. A base existed, yes, but parts of the larger mystery may have been natural. This theory sounds cautious. Scientific, reasonable. Yet it struggles with the repeated mechanical pulses, the moving hatch, the missing beacon, and the traces of activity in places that should have been dead for decades. The third theory is the oldest and the most disturbing. It suggests the Soviets did not build the true site. They found it. Perhaps while surveying for military advantage, they discovered a buried structure deep beneath the Arctic seabed. A cavity or chamber unlike any known geology. A place emitting signals, fields, or patterns that did not belong in nature. They built over it, sealed it, studied it, and whatever was below may still be there. Not alive in any simple sense, but not inactive either. A machine, a system, a buried intelligence, or something even older, waiting under stone, under steel, under black water, beyond the reach of sunlight and history. No one can prove that theory. That is what makes it so hard to dismiss. After the final expedition, the site grew quiet. Reports were fragmented. Data disappeared into private archives. Funding ended. Several researchers moved on and refused interviews. Years later, an autonomous recorder was placed near the basin by an unrelated climate mission. It was not looking for a Soviet base. It was measuring deep water current behavior. When the instrument was recovered, technicians found an anomaly in its audio log. On 3 separate nights, from the same direction as the buried structure, it recorded a sequence of low pulses followed by a long metallic resonance. Then, at the end of the third event, there was something else, a rising sound, not whale song, not tectonic noise, not propeller wash. It resembled pressure moving through a vast hollow chamber, as if water had entered a space that had been sealed for a very long time. The final pulse came 90 seconds later. Then silence. A follow-up survey was scheduled. Before it could begin, satellite ice data showed a sudden release of sediment from the slope near the site. Part of the ridge had collapsed into deeper water. Whether the lower hatch still exists is unknown. Whether the deeper complex remains intact is unknown. But one last image survives from the earlier dives, a frame most people ignore at first. It shows the hatch on the main structure, half buried in silt, lit by the ROV's pale lights. The door appears closed. Then you notice the sediment cloud near the base of the frame. It is moving inward, not outward, as if disturbed by current inward, drawn under the door, as though something inside the structure was still pulling water down into the dark. 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, a hidden base remained on the ocean floor. But the most terrifying possibility is this: the Soviet base may have been the newest thing down there. If a forgotten empire built a station above something buried beneath the seabed, and even they could not fully seal it, what is still waiting in the dark below?